You're watching Frank in Context. What did Donald Trump mean when he said this?
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Now, there's a lot of different takes on this, and one of the predominant ones, one of the major ones in mainstream media was that what he meant was he's going to get rid of the vote. He's going to get rid of democracy. He's going to be a dictator on day one, and in 4 years, you're not going to have to vote again because he's not going to leave. Just like January 6th, he's not going to leave. He's going to stay in power, and he's just going to be there, and there's not going to be a need to vote. He's going to fix the system, meaning he's going to rig the system. So this is one of the predominant interpretations of what Trump is saying here, but I want to put this in context to give you the full perspective because, in my opinion, that's not what he meant at all. So just as a refresher, let's take a look at the full clip put out there by mainstream media.
Vote early, vote absentee, vote on election day. I don't care how, but you have to get out and vote. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
All right, so you heard him say a few times there, you're not going to have to vote. It's going to be fixed. It's going to be fine. You're not going to have to vote. 4 more years, you're not going to have to vote. So it doesn't look good if you take it out of context. What does that mean? The door is kind of open to interpretation, but let's take a look at some of these other clips from the same speech and see if we can kind of add context to what this guy is talking about.
I don't want to scold you, but you know that Christians do not vote proportionately. They don't vote like they should. They're not big voters. You know who else aren't voters? The NRA endorsed me very powerfully. Strongest endorsement they can give. National Rifle Association. People that own guns and rifles are not big voters. They have to vote.
So here Trump is addressing the crowd, and keep in mind he's in Florida at a Christian convention, and Florida is a stand your ground state. And he's saying Christians and gun owners, they typically don't vote for whatever reason, but it's a huge demographic of people, and if you guys just turned out and voted, it would make a massive difference in this election. And if you think about it, Christians don't typically vote. There's a lot of demographics inside of the Christian demographic, like Amish people or Jehovah's Witnesses, and they don't get involved in politics, but the numbers are there. So if those people turned out to vote, it would make a tremendous difference. And he's saying, this whole election, the 2024 election, there were a lot of issues that Christians really cared about and gun owners cared about as well. And he's saying, you guys got to turn out and vote for this stuff. And here he is again in this next clip, reiterating that and saying,
Christians are a group that's known not to vote very much. You have to go out at least this election. Just get us into that beautiful White House. Vote for your congressmen and women. Vote for your senators. We will change this country for the better. This country will be great again like never before. You got to vote.
All right, so it's very clear to me that Trump's angle is you guys typically don't vote. Your demographic doesn't vote. You got to turn out and vote in this election just this one time. It's really important. So that's where he's coming from. But that in itself might not be enough to prove that his angle wasn't to eventually end democracy and get rid of the vote entirely, right? This next clip makes it even more clear.
We should have one-day voting, paper ballots, voter ID, and certification of citizenship, and that's what we're striving for.
All right, so there it is right there. He's not calling for an end to democracy. He's not saying he wants to end the vote. He's saying he wants one-day voting. He's saying he wants to make the voting process more legitimate. He wants to have voter identification. He wants to have proof of citizenship, and he wants to do it the way we used to do it not that long ago. Everybody shows up on the same day. They mark a piece of paper, they pull a lever, whatever it is, and then they count the vote. And there's an election, and it all happens in one day, and a winner is announced. I personally think the longer you spend counting the votes, you're going to do it for days or weeks or whatever, that's just more opportunity for corruption. That's more opportunity for fudging the numbers, for manipulating the vote count. And he wants to bring it back to a place where we're just hammering it all out in one day. We used to do it. Why can't we do it now? So For me personally, this right here does it. The fact that he's saying this in the same speech, how does mainstream media not go back and point this out and say, well, you know, he also did say that he wanted one-day voting, and he laid out the parameters for what that means and what he wants voting to look like under his administration. It just doesn't look like an end to democracy to me. And if one clip from the same speech isn't enough, here's a second clip where he's basically reiterating the same thing.
And I will secure our elections. Our goal will be, as I said, one-day voting with paper ballots, proof of citizenship, and a thing called voter ID.
So that's twice in the same speech Trump is saying that he wants to make the vote more legitimate. Not get rid of the vote, not get rid of democracy, but he wants voter ID, proof of citizenship, and same-day paper ballot vote counting. That doesn't sound like an end to democracy. Now, the thing that bothers me the most is not that there's two instances of him saying this in the same speech. It's that the second clip, the one that we just watched, literally happens 1 minute and 30 seconds before the viral clip that mainstream media pumped out to the masses. So literally, they just had to rewind the speech 1 minute and 30 seconds, and they could have seen Trump saying what his vision for voting is in his administration. And not only that, but we're going to take a look at this next clip as well. In the next clip, it's even closer to the viral clip, and he's talking about why he can't get that vision passed through Congress. So let's take a look at that.
You know, when you negotiate, and I do that with the Democrats, and I negotiate with them all the time on this, but I say, look, we got to fix our laws on voting. We have to start with voter ID. Everybody has to have, no way! The discussion never even goes any further. I say, we have to have voter ID. It's called voter identification. Nope, we're not going to do it. Now, there's only one reason they do that, because they want to cheat. There's only one reason.
So here he is talking about how he negotiated with Democrats to try to get voter ID laws passed, and they apparently stonewalled him on that effort. Now, I don't understand why he would be talking about his efforts to pass voter ID laws if he was against democracy or if he was against the vote, our right to vote, right? If anything, if he was against that stuff, he wouldn't be fighting to make the process more legitimate. Now, maybe the argument is that he's going to prevent people from voting by passing voter ID laws. I mean, when I get pulled over by the cops, I have to give them my driver's license. When I go to work, I have to use my work ID to get into work. When I go to a library, I have to provide my library card. When I join a gym, I have to provide identification, probably a driver's license or some other form of ID to prove who I am, so that gym will give me a membership. I can't even join a gym without an ID. So the idea that people should be able to vote in a federal election without ID, but you have to have ID to join a gym, come on, man. Like, who are you trying to fool with this stuff? So mainstream media intentionally took this clip of Trump out of context in order to paint him as this dictator type who's going to get rid of the vote and get rid of democracy. And meanwhile, in the same speech, he mentioned 2 times his very clear plan to make the vote more legitimate in the U.S. And 2 separate times, he called Christians out on the fact that they don't typically vote. So I think when you put it all together, what it sounds like to me is he's saying, look, Christians, I know you guys don't typically vote. Historically, you don't vote. But this election is really important, so you need to come out and vote just this one time. I'm going to fix the country if you get me into office. Just vote this one time, and then you can go back to your regular not voting ways. I think that's much more in line with what he's saying, and I think there's plenty of evidence in this speech to support that. So shame on mainstream media for trying to take a clip out of context in order to fool people into buying their false narrative. Anyway, that's all I've got on this one. Thanks for watching, and let me leave you with this. Don't believe everything you see on the internet. There's a lot of short clips out there and a lot of sensational headlines, and a lot of that stuff is just taken out of context and spun in a way to drive engagement. And people don't really care if they're driving engagement by making their viewers angry or emotional or pitting them against each other. And it's a real dangerous landscape out there. So just be careful what you see and make sure you're really digging into it a little bit to kind of get a little bit of extra proof before you just believe it wholesale.